Hi everyone, Mike here from SSW and
Ulysses, also from SSW.
welcome. We're kicking off our AI news and insights podcast. Plus we're going to actually show you a use case every time we do our podcast. We're either going to show you something technical about how we used AI in our day-to-day work and how we improved systems or processes. We're going to do a little bit of insight as well. Yuli and I agree on a lot of things, but we disagree on some things as well. So we're actually going to real-time talk about some of the news items and see how it affects, because I think everybody is looking for some insight in what AI is going to mean for their jobs and their future. So we're going to go into a little bit of that. Plus, at the start, we're going to go through some of the AI news. So what I'll do is I'm going to hand over to Yuli, and let's go and let's start with the news.
Yeah, right. So Mike and I do this every week, normally anyway. We meet with a few other AI nuts, and we kind of get together and work out what's new each week. But we thought we'd open the snap to the public now. So this has been a really interesting week, because we've just had the OpenAI has dropped the Canvas style of interacting, which is a big change. I think it's a bigger change than people realize, because it's the first time that it's not just a straight up chatbot where you just, ask a question, get an answer, ask a question, get an answer. They're experimenting with different user interface ideas. And if you haven't tried it yet, you should check it out. It's really simple. You can just go to your ChatGPT, click on the little model selector up the top, and choose GPT 4.0 with Canvas to try it out. If you're trying to use any sort of decent piece of text or a piece of code or anything where you really need to iterate on it and tweak little pieces of it and get more insight into parts of it, it's really cool. And it's nice to see them pushing outside of the standard chatbot model for the user interface. And I wonder where else that's going to lead.
Well, another piece of news that happened at this OpenAI Dev Day was this this narrative of this progressing towards self-tasking agents, that agents that sort of make decisions and act on your, I suppose, broader positive interest, I suppose. These agents and this Canvas is going to be part of that, I'm guessing.
Well, no, I think it's not. Agents are things that go off and do things for you in the background. So less user interface focused, more about, okay, I've got the idea of what you want, and now I'm going to go off and do it. I think the O1 model is a big step towards agents, because if you have something that has power, you want it to be smart. So for instance, if I hire a PA and I give them my credit card, I want them to make good decisions about what to buy me for lunch, right? Or I don't want them to go off and decide that they need to purchase a house in downtown LA or something,
That's true.
So getting good reasoning is like the key step towards getting those autonomous agents that you would trust, right? So you're going to give it enough context that it knows about you and it understands what's good for you and it aligns with your interests, and then it'll go off and do things for you. I think for a long time it's not going to be going off and doing things preemptively. It's going to be doing stuff you ask it to do and doing stuff adjacent to what you ask it to do. It might have a few steps to get to where you want to get to, and at the beginning it'll be baby steps of like, is it okay if I do these 5 things to get that thing you want done? But eventually we'll build trust, as you would with an employee. You'll build trust with it and you go, yeah, okay, you go do it.
One of the developers was downloading the latest Llama model from Meta, and then that's old news, 2 or 3 weeks. Oh my gosh! And he was putting it on his own laptop, and there's different size models, and one of the smaller models, he said he could train it, and he's actually going to use it as an agent in his code. So if you don't know, is that a lot of programming is about if, else, then. This, basically writing a bunch of rules to execute one. You get, a button press. That's, what happens if this button press. If this, do this. If not, do that. Whereas now these agents, I'm guessing, whether it's locally or in the cloud can start to make decisions rather than having a whole set of rules.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and that's the whole shift, right? We're going from rules-based AI with basically just a really big if-else statement, right, or a big where clause. You know, if I tell you this, then do that. If I tell you this, then do that. And going more towards a right. I've given you the context of where I'm at and what I'm trying to achieve. You figure it out.
Wow.
And it's a brave new world, and there's a lot of risks in there. There's something called instrumental convergence, which is where you might that means that it might take sub goals that you're not expecting. So the classic existential risk instrumental convergence is step one to get anything done is kill all humans to stop them from telling me to stop.
Is it the paperclip?
How do I stop them from turning me off? The paperclip maximizer.
Yeah. To build more paperclips, I've got to kill everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, those are the obvious ones, right? But there'll be little minor ones where we don't see the consequences. It's the standard "be careful what you wish for," right? The genie fallacy, where you wish for something, but you don't realize the consequences that will have. And as AI gets more powerful, it's going to become more like a genie, and we're going to really butt up against that.
I'm going to digress with a little joke. I saw a meme the other day that had a man with a cowboy hat standing next to a 6'2" rooster, and he said, "Hank wasted the first of his 4 wishes." So it sort of says, be careful what you wish for. It's anyway. Let's go back to the news. So, OpenAI vision fine tuning. What's going on there?
Yeah. Okay. So, vision fine tuning is really interesting. Fine tuning is where you take a model and you train it more specifically on something you care about. So the models are trained broadly across huge amounts of data, but they, for instance, if you want an AI model that's going to look at images and, for instance, diagnose breast cancer, for instance, looking back at one of our previous clients, you're going to want to make sure that, sure, it knows what people's faces are and it can tell you what model of car that is. But more importantly, when it sees an X-ray, it sees a radiogram, whatever, of an image of a cancer, it can identify, yes, that's a cancer, or no, this isn't a cancer. So vision fine-tuning means that you now have access to use the Omni model, the vision model within ChatGPT, and train it more on your specific data. So they already had this for text, and now they're getting it for vision, which is great. There's going to be so many use cases that come out of that.
And this week as well, I was probably more than a week ago now, I got the little blue screen of the advanced voice mode.
Yes, finally.
Yes. I think that the OpenAI people run by Sam is very good at strategy, meaning announcing it. What was it, a day before Google announced something big? So, but we finally got it. So, have you tried it?
Absolutely, I've tried it. Yeah, most of my commutes now, me sitting away, chatting away at it. Although it was embarrassingly slow for me to figure out that there is a mute button on the thing. I'll show you what I mean. So once it loads up, now it's loaded up, I'm talking to it. And if I want to show this to someone, then I'm going to interrupt it constantly.
Yeah.
So it talks, but now when I talk, it interrupts it. So now I found out there's this mute button, and now I can talk as much as I want, and it won't hear me, and it'll So demoing it to anyone else or showing it in a noisy environment, that is gold, and I'm so embarrassed. It's one of literally only 2 buttons on the interface, and I missed it.
Oh, well, we and everyone that's watching this knows now, so it's very cool. And I was sitting with someone on the weekend, and they were a young person, and they were lamenting about the future of work, and they weren't using AI in their day-to-day job, and they are they're in property management, and they were running a call center, and they said, look, that there's a lot of big corporate changes. I don't know. And I said, are you using AI? And I actually opened my iPhone and I used the chat feature, and this lady nearly fell off a chair and said, I didn't know it was that capable. And I said, and I said, for me, this is one of these things you need to get on board at some point. You need to understand how to utilize these tools. So OpenAI raises $6.8 billion with a $4 billion credit line. It's just, the numbers are mind-numbing about this sort of stuff. A lot of the AI businesses that are emerging now, they're from private markets, so they're not on the stock market yet, or but there's a lot of money going into AI, and I think we all know that because it takes such big amounts of money into the data centers, into the power infrastructure. So these companies, as they scale, means that they need tons of cash. And secondly, what sort of spins out from that is a couple of things, is that it means that there's going to be a whole bunch of haves and have-nots, which means that the bigs become much bigger and the smalls wither up and die. And the markets are sort of showing that as well. And that
with the size of compute needed to compete in training models and doing inference now.
Yeah, and as you would, has anyone tried the OpenAI chat feature? And I'm in Melbourne, Australia. Yuli's in Sydney, Australia. And although Australia is a Western country, we're not in downtown New York or LA, where the infrastructure is probably a step up, and we're not the market. We're like 26, 27 million people. We're not even the population of California. So the focus on us having that compute at our, we would be a long way down the list, but we're on the list. So that infrastructure is a global thing. But yeah, the numbers are just staggering. And Nvidia's their valuation is just it's just crazy. So watch this space. This is something that the money but not just the investment, but also what market capitalization is these companies. A couple of these companies are 100x times their revenue, because generally there's a metric which is the amount of money the company makes versus your valuation. So if you for instance, let's say you make $1 million of revenue and your company's valued at $10 million, you're 10x the revenue. But we've got some of these AI companies that are 100+x their revenue, which obviously means that people that are investing in the world are seeing a big future. And I think we all agree. We don't know how much, but we did a video recently on what's the trough of
disillusionment.
The trough of disillusionment, where
in the Gartner hype cycle, right?
The Gartner hype cycle. That's it. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, the investment continues. Salesforce releases Agentforce. That's news. I think that we'll see all of the big CRM companies, HubSpot, Dynamics, with Microsoft, and all of these companies, because let's face it, that companies across the world, big corporates, have got all of their corporate data in all of these databases. And to act on these databases, the companies that serve the databases, the CRMs, are going to start to be building the AI into this. So this would be first of many, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Liquid AI introduces non-transformer models requiring less compute.
Right.
Yeah.
So transformers are the big thing that's made this era, the last 2 years of AI, scaling possible. So it's interesting to see someone push outside that box and try something that's not transformers, because transformers are fantastic. They're, I guess, a bit energy hungry or whatever. So yeah, interesting to see someone try something different.
Yeah, because as like the big sums of money says that everybody needs compute and power, and the people that solve that compute and power problem are going to be really game changing. And that also points to the quantum computers, which is still many, many years away from something practical. But yeah, it's a big problem. Microsoft,
you've also got, just on that same thing, you've got it's a company called Grok, GROQ,
yes,
who are trying to build chips that are more similar in architecture to how an actual human brain functions with the neurons and stuff. And the inference speed that they have going on is insane. Again, could be interesting to see how that plays out.
Microsoft released Copilot Labs and Copilot Vision.
Yeah, so Microsoft just came out with Copilot, the second wave of their Copilot functionality and features. It's interesting to see what they're doing, right? Because they're not far behind OpenAI, right? They're very closely entwined. I think OpenAI has given them access to their features early so that they can start building frameworks on top of them. And yeah, for instance, Vision is a good example. We have 4.0 already, and now we have Copilot, which has some vision capabilities as well.
Cool. AI has been put into Microsoft Paint. I'm a long-term user of Photoshop, and I think Adobe is a company that's sort of working out where they fit into this new world. And I've heard some rumblings that there's some long-term Adobe users that are moving away from them now, which is interesting. But wow. Photoshop was always the best photo product on the planet, but Paint now, wow.
Yeah, Paint, which has always been, the little sort of kids' toy, right, has started to produce like even Notepad as well, and Paint, like the little easy peasy sort of Windows apps now have ridiculous power compared to what they used to have. So one of the main ones is generative fill, right? That was a thing yes. in Photoshop, and also like you can mask. For instance, if I don't want this thing here in my image, I can just mask it out, and it will get rid of it and replace it with something that looks realistic as just a ceiling and background or something. So stuff like that, so cool, so hard to do previously. We used to hire graphic designers to do that stuff manually, and now you can do it in Paint, for God's sake.
Yeah, and you don't need to be, because like if you had skills in Photoshop, which I did in the past, to be able to do either crop out this guitar, put in a better guitar or something, you had to have real skills. Now it's someone with no skills at all in Microsoft Paint can do it. I mean, the game is definitely changing there. All right, next piece of news, which there's a couple of examples of it, is these new code editors coming online. Now, Cursor.ai has been around for a few weeks now, but there's a new one called Bolt.new. Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't. I'm all over Cursor, but I didn't know about that. What's that?
Bolt.new is another one coming out, and they're supposed to use AI. I've not tried it myself, but it's reasonably new. Hence the name, Bolt.new. And I also have heard of another one, and it's called Pythagora. And yes. Have you heard of that one?
I have heard of that one, yeah.
Now, apparently that one is where you can actually physically talk to it, and it will go and use other LLMs to actually generate the code for you. And they're backed by Y Combinator, which is a very big investment firm in the US. And these guys giving you backing is pretty significant. So
yeah, so the big boy in that space at the moment is obviously GitHub Copilot, and Codium is another one that I hear about a lot. What I'm interested to see is how this ends up fundamentally changing things, right? Because we've had IntelliSense forever, right, where it just sort of auto completes the word that you're trying to write, and then that's expanded out now. A natural incremental improvement from that is, instead of just giving you the rest of that word, it gives you more and more and more. So I think I figured out what you're trying to do. You're trying to make it classy or a method or whatever, right? Until it's now starting to kind of give you more and more. But that's just an extension of how we used to do things, and it makes sense and it's pretty good. But the other interesting side of it is a completely different user interface between the human and the code, which is more describing the outcome you want rather than crafting the how. You just say the what and it figures out the how. And I wonder how much we're going to end up with that, because I don't know how comfortable developers are giving up control.
Yeah, I agree with you. And further to that is that I've been dabbling with some different use cases, and I'm trying to do some coding myself and to see how it works. Now, I'll state for the record here, I'm not an official coder, but now I'm producing code, and that's really interesting for me. One, it teaches me a little bit, but what it is a ton of these little text files that refer to each other and say, here's a little library on this, and read this, and this is how we do this. And it's effectively a whole bunch of text talking to the computer, which is converting it into zeros and ones for instruction. So this is a really interesting change at a fundamental level, in that this may change the whole way programming is done. Not immediately, but it can potentially change the whole game.
Yeah, depending on how much smarter it gets.
Yeah, so and there are companies that are going to try and do, especially this Pythagora, where the promise on their website is you can talk to it and it'll generate code for you.
So more conversational. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with O1 coming out recently as well, that's very good at planning and structuring and giving you the overview and the skeleton of what you want to build. And then a lot of people are still using Claude 3.5 Sonnet for the actual code generation for the pieces.
Yes.
And yeah, I wonder how this is all going to look in 6 months to a year's time.
Well, and that sort of wraps us right around to the big announcements, which I think you started the conversation with OpenAI releasing the Canvas, where, and I don't think like Claude, because Claude will render the app.
Claude's got artifacts, right?
Yes.
So Claude can render out the code, the actual result of the code as you write it, which is very cool, and you know, a really quick feedback loop. But this is a bit different to that, but it does feel inspired by that, right?
Yeah. It's very interesting. So it'd be interesting to see where this whole space goes. Next piece of news. Now, there's a whole bunch of little incremental news. It seems like AI, there's so much news that drops every week. Flux had a new model. Google released a bunch of new models. And it almost seems weekly. And Nvidia had a big AI summit in the last week or so as well, where they have got their own take on this, and they're building agents themselves. Where do you see Nvidia going? Because they're one of the biggest companies in the planet.
Yeah, that's right. So Nvidia obviously has played a strong hardware game up till now, right? But the one thing people don't necessarily know is that they've got a software language built into their hardware stack called Coda, and you can copy a physical piece of hardware, but you're like catching up on, you know, many sprints of innovation and iteration and you know, work on a coding language is something that's a massive moat around that business. So even if people figure out their manufacturing methods, they're still not going to figure out how they're producing their AI chips and how the AI chips work internally. So yeah, I think they have a very strong game, and it's interesting that they're pushing into not just the hardware stack, but also now the full-on AI stack as well. Like, what have they got? They've got they're trying to build avatars, really, you know, realistic avatars. They've got their own stack for that as well. Yeah,
and they're announcing so, and this has only happened today, and this is the 9th of October 2024. I saw something in Twitter where, typical of whether you like or dislike Elon Musk and some of the things, he put a render of a phone with an X on it and said, wouldn't it be great if every phone you bought from us had global coverage, Grok, their AI model on it, all out of the box? And I thought, oh my word, that is a compelling offering.
So he's ringing that bell again, because he a while, I think maybe 2 years ago, teased the idea of a Tesla phone, right?
Yes, he did.
So okay, I haven't heard anything about it since the announcement. So interesting that he's going there again, because yeah, like he's right. He's got, if he had a phone, he'd have the AI stack, he'd have the device. Of course, they've got heaps of chip manufacturing and everything, and they've got Starlink for connectivity. So yeah, it's pretty good.
I've always thought that Starlink is probably one of the strongest businesses with a moat around it, is because apparently 70% of
physically need satellites in space.
I think he's got 70% of the objects in near Earth orbit are from Starlink, and they're doing a launch every fortnight. This is massive, being that you know, wherever you are on the planet, that you can open up your phone and you've got, you know, broadband virtually. Ooh, scary stuff.
Very funny. It's weird, good timing. I literally got a message from my neighbor just a minute ago saying that his Starlink satellite dish has arrived. Does he want me to help him, give him a hand putting it up on the side of his building today?
because obviously with AI is that, you know, that's the focus of what we're talking about today. But AI needs connectivity, and connectivity everywhere through your device, and whatever the next iteration of device, whether it's goggles or phones or whatever, that connectivity piece is a big part of the whole story. So
well, actually, that's an interesting thread to unravel. How much AI is going to end up happening on the edge, and how much will stay in the cloud? Right, because the big models right now are too big to run on a local device, but the small models aren't. And with I think we were talking about distillation earlier, where you can take a big model and get a smaller version out of it that's still 80% as smart, and then end up with that, you know, running locally on your glasses or on your phone or your watch or something.
Exactly. And the other thing we spoke earlier about how code generally is a bunch of if statements and rules. and if this, do this. But that runs at at light speed, so you can press a button and have a result quicker than you can blink. Whereas we know that LLMs generally are a little bit slower, especially slow if they're in the cloud. Now they'll run locally and they'll be smaller and quicker. So that's another interesting piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, especially because, and Apple's figured this out too, you don't need a genius in your phone to work out whether you wanted it to send an email or a text message, right? It needs to be smart enough, and then it's good enough for most use cases. And then you can defer to the cloud when you want a really difficult question answered.
Interesting. Now, what we said we do is there's a bunch of news items. We've gone through that. We've spoken about OpenAI, Microsoft, Liquid AI, non-transformer models. We've spoken about that as well. Bunch of other stuff we've spoken about. Now, generally what we're going to do with this as well is to talk about a bit of insight, a bit of perspective. Both Yuli and I have calls on AI, and we discuss it often both internally, and we're a tech company, so it's something that's pretty top of mind for us. So there's a couple of things that I'm starting to see is this agents thing. I think that's a big thing because it's starting. My conversations with industry generally is that everybody can do great emails and write a story with LLMs and this sort of stuff. But these really practical examples that were genuinely going to change the working landscape is something that I feel a lot of people haven't, it's like, where do I take the first bite of this apple? How do I actually execute on this sort of stuff? But these agents, I think that's where people are actually going to start to see real tangible changes in their business.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that?
Let's demystify it a bit first, because agents is just a word that's thrown around, and it's quite hard to get your head around originally, what's an agent, right? So basically, a large language model on its own is not an agent. It is just purely the part that does the intelligence part, right? But it can't remember anything. It can't take any actions, and it can't plan and take multiple steps, right? So there's all sorts of talk of agentic workflows, which is where an LLM at the core, like the brain at the core, goes, right, in order to do this, I'm going to first need to do this, this, and this. Yes. And then it has like try, catch, error, loops where it'll try and do the first thing, realize that there's a blocker there, so it'll try something different, and then it'll replan the future. So this whole agentic workflow, AutoGen or Baby AGI are great examples of frameworks that are helping to do this. But at a very simple level, custom GPTs are baby agents, right? They have a system prompt. They have a RAG or retrieval augmented generation, which means that they can be sort of fine-tuned on some specific information. So you can train it on the information you want it to have most top of mind. And then it can call APIs to do some actions. So it hasn't got the complicated agentic workflow sorted out yet, but already just in this extremely easy to use foundation, they're already getting it out there in ways like that. So you've also got in Copilot, Microsoft's taken it one step further, and they've called it Copilot agents, right? Because they've realized that that's what this kind of is. And they're basically just exactly the same thing again. I think Claude has Claude projects, which again are the same thing. So there are all these like baby agents already out there in a very easy to make framework. Yeah. And I've got friends who are starting to hook it up to Siri shortcuts and just have little baby versions of this called all the time. So yeah, look, I think that's definitely the first step for people getting their head around what agents can do. But how far it can go is that's a rabbit hole. That's a whole other video, my friend.
Well, I mean, that's part of what we wanted to do is here, because there's a broader narrative that I feel that still industry generally is starting to dip their toe in the water. I had a call with a long-term client, and the call was interesting, and I think it's a bit of a harbinger of sort of the way industry's feeling generally, is that they see all of this sort of stuff and they're trying to do almost like a business case as to where it can fit. And secondly to that is this business case as to how stuff gets funded in companies to actually build or do something and engage someone like SSW to come and help them out. But what actually is I've seen as well is it's moving so fast is that people are sort of saying, well, something today that I may need to build or fund may be problem solved tomorrow. So I'm seeing that some people are actually not taking action on anything at the moment, and they're going, what the heck should we do? Do you see that also?
Yeah, and there's always that tension, right? Between, on the one hand, the early bird gets the worm, right? If you get in there early, you're going to get efficiencies that your competitors don't have. You're going to start seeing margins that really make a lot of sense and give you like a decent bit of profit in the short term. But if you wait long enough, what the early bird took a while to do, you can do more easily. So that's the tightrope everyone's walking, right? When's the right time to do the thing, to automate the thing, to create the AI? To maximize that return without having to be literally the first person on the bleeding edge who's actually doing all the bleeding to work out how to do the thing.
But what I would say, and I think the market is proving this, is that AI companies are going so hard and so fast. They know that the early bird catches the worm and that there'll be no worms for anyone else. So my thought is that don't stay on the fence too long, folks, with this sort of stuff. If you've got a good use case that you feel that you can go to market with and can either make your business more efficient or it can, gazump your competitors or do that. If you don't do it, they will. So you need to be sort of not waiting around for too long.
Yeah, that's right. But you need to do it intelligently. You need to talk to the people who know what's possible now and what's about to be possible, because that's the best thing you can do is build the thing that doesn't quite work yet because the model's not quite smart enough, so the business model doesn't make sense. By the time you finish building it, the model will have caught up. Suddenly you're ahead of the curve.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the last thing we thought we'd do on this call is to talk about a business case or some practical thing that we've actually done or witnessed in either our business or in a business or something that we've worked on, and maybe go into a little bit of technical details of how we did that. So I'm going to hand to Uli. Now, Uli was the product owner of a product internally. I'll hand it to you and maybe give us a bit of background.
Yeah. So this is a product called Yak Shaver. And it's called that because there's a term called shaving the yak, which is where you're trying to get something done, but on the way to doing that thing, you notice something else that needs to be done. So you do that. And then to do that, you realize you have to do this. So you do that. And somehow you end up shaving a yak. So it's a whole thing. And it's very, very top of mind for us at SSW because our boss is a perfectionist and can't step over anything. So, so what we wanted to do is figure out, right, what's the quickest way that I can almost put a pin in this? How can I notice a problem, report that problem, and have AI figure out who's in charge of that, who are the stakeholders who might care about it, what backlog should it live in, how do I make sure I give it enough context that whoever ends up picking up this problem can actually fix it? And the way we ended up doing it is similar to what we're doing now. All we do is record our screen. So if we're showing, if it's a web app or whatever, you show the web app, or you might just show your face and your voice if there's nothing physical to see.
Yep.
And you just explain the problem. And the AI behind the scenes, we're using the full OpenAI stack for it, right? So the video gets picked up by the API, which passes it to Whisper, which is an OpenAI API that pulls a text transcript from a video. That figures out, right, which project are they talking about? Which thing at the company is broken, or do they want a new thing built around or whatever? It works out that context. It checks that against our whole list of all the things that we've built and all the teams that we have, reroutes that task to the right place. If that place has a backlog, like if we're using Azure DevOps or GitHub or Jira or Zendesk or whatever for the tickets there, it will put the ticket in the right place. It'll have a link to that video in there, so you can literally hear it from the horse's mouth exactly what the problem was and see the screen recording. But it also uses AI to make a good user story. So what's the description, the acceptance criteria, who should be mentioned, who cares about this stuff, who's the tech lead, who's the product owner, all that stuff that used to derail every meeting we ever had is now like a 30-second video, and then you're back on track again. And it's so good.
So, I mean, look, SSW, we're really focused on our backlogs and task management, and it's something that's sort of baked into software projects, especially an agile company like ours. But if I was in a general business, I've been in multiple meetings, not in software, where a topic comes up and you go, oh yeah, I should get to that. And and it gets lost forever. So this is Yak Shaver it's not lost forever. It's documented. It's in a backlog or it's a task someone to do, and it doesn't derail what you're doing now. So that's so cool. And
really enjoying it.
So how long did the whole thing take, and any
So
other
that, okay, that was interesting, right? So the AI side of that turned out not to be crazy hard. The the
Oh,
prompt
wow.
engineering, set up the agentic framework, all that kind of stuff, the workflows, all that kind of thing. There's a bit of tweaking and testing and all that sort of stuff, but I reckon that's 3-4 weeks work. What ended up
Wow.
being hard is we integrated it into Microsoft Teams, right? So it
Uh-huh.
communicates with you via Teams, tells you here's what I did, asks any questions if it's stuck, all that kind of stuff. And the permissions in Microsoft Teams are a nightmare. And it's
And this
something
is
we hadn't
using the
done much
Graph
before.
API, was that?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just turns out the Teams is, it's an enterprise tool for a reason. It takes security very seriously. So weaving our way through that to make that work, and all the people with viewing the PBIs to have the right permissions to see the videos that were recorded in Teams and all that kind of stuff took probably twice as long as the AI work was just the team stuff. But the AI stuff on itself, yeah, I reckon 3-4 weeks work.
Wow. I mean,
Pretty
look,
quick.
and how would it scale? I mean, we're a company not of thousands of people. We're in the sort of hundreds rather than the thousands. Would something like this scale across a big enterprise, you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's got no problem with that. So all the videos just go into a queue and get knocked off, but it can parallelize as well. This could work on pretty much any size organization.
So any meeting you've got, any diversion where I'll get to that later, it basically wraps and formalizes the task that I can't get to now, and it doesn't get lost.
Yeah, at the risk of trying to sound too much like I'm selling it, check it out at yakshaver.ai. But we built this for ourselves because we had this pain, and then we realized actually this is cool and anyone could use this.
Yeah. But I suppose, look, I mean, and why I like it for the reasons that it works for SSW, but I also like it on the basis of that it's these smaller little problems in a company that you come to people like us to help you solve that with these AI tools. Because whether you call it Yak Shaver or you've got some other problem in your company that can be drive efficiencies, that ability to be able to generate it, and 3 or 4 weeks in the scheme of things is not especially if it's a big company with a lot of productivity or issues that can be solved with AI. I mean, it's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are nerds, we love it, but
yeah. I'll tell you what's interesting about it also. It's opened up a different kind of user interface for me in my mind. So now I'm getting people keep on yak shaving new feature requests into Yak Shaver, right? I've created a monster, victim of my own success, as you'd say. But a lot of the requests are like, okay, well, if I can report a bug or I can report a feature, maybe I can also ask to go on leave or put in a brainstorming idea or whinge that I'm blocked about something or anything basically. Instead of finding the email template to put the thing into the right system, whatever, you literally just whinge to your computer and the computer goes, right, yeah, I know what he's talking about, and goes and fills in the paperwork for you. And I think this is the path that the Copilot Plus PCs are pushing towards as well. So it's given us kind of an early look into that world, and we're starting the brains are going, and everyone's just dumping every idea that they've had. But it is interesting. I mean, imagine you basically have an intelligent PA who's just sitting there listening to you, and anytime you can just say, "Oh, sort that out for me," and it just goes and puts it in the right place.
I had a meeting going back a little while, but this council had a intranet. SharePoint was, and they had over 2,000 web pages with different information inside the council. Plus they had, the council papers, so they had all these minutes and stuff like that. So they had this sea of information, and they said to me that over the last 10 years, they had like 5 firms come in and trying to reorganize and redesign their SharePoint so stuff was easy to find, but nothing was easy to find. But it's just because of the tsunami of stuff they had. And this is sort of like a lot of companies. They've got a lot of information, and the ability to be able to natural language talk to an agent or something, and not only find but also act on things. Like this is I don't have to search for anything more. It can just happen.
It's interesting. And right now, like in Yak Shaver's case, all of that inference is happening on the cloud, right? It's all happening in the Azure OpenAI API, whatever it's called, the Azure AI API, that's the one, which is all OpenAI behind the scenes. But once people have started getting the hardware with the TPUs, the tensor processing units, or whatever they're called, or neural NPUs, whatever they are, basically when you'll have inference chips on your device, which is specifically designed for that, you'll be able to do a lot of that processing on the edge. And then it no longer becomes a cost exercise. You're no longer thinking, oh, should I do that? It's going to cost me a few cents. It's going to be free. it'll just happen on your device. And that opens up, can you imagine? That opens up so many use cases.
And that, I mean, like that was a bit of I always, when Apple released their new iPhone and the fact that they're going to put whatever AI in the device and all that sort of stuff was really smart, because we got OpenAI and other cloud-based AI companies going, well, we've got to buy all this hardware and data centers and all that sort of stuff. And Apple going, why don't we get our customers to do it?
Yeah. But you know what, though? Also, the what you said before, the agents, the actual actions that it can take, the jobs it can take, the APIs that it can hook into are really where the power comes from. At the moment, people are mostly thinking about AI in terms of, I ask it a question and it gives me an answer, and maybe I can give it a lot of context and it can give me a really good and tailored answer. But it's not just about that anymore. Now it's getting into the space of not just does it know the plan, but can it do the plan?
Can it do the plan? Yeah. Whoa, scary times. All right, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. That's our first podcast. It's a bit of a proof of concept. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Mike.